Hello everyone. This lecture we will be learning say 600. Okay, using the work of another auditor. Who is another auditor, and also using the work of another auditor. The work performed by other auditor will be used by the principal auditor. I will give an example. In case of Tata Sons, it is a holding company. Okay, it is a holding company. It has to prepare the consolidated financial statement. In case of group audit, SA 600 is applicable. Okay. The components, the consolidated financial statements of Tata Sons include the components financial information. That is financial statement. Components financial statement included in the consolidated financial statement. Okay. I will take example. The telecom and media company is in UK. Okay, and also it is audited by certified professional accountant. Okay, CPA audited by CPA. Also, auditors of the components are called as other auditors. Okay, the components auditors are called as other auditors. Now I will explain what do you mean, what is the definition of principal auditor and also other auditor and component. First one is principal auditor. Principal auditor is the auditor with the responsibility for reporting on the financial information of an entity. Okay, entity means in our example Tata Sons. Tata Sons is the holding company which need to prepare consolidated financial statement. So auditor has a responsibility to report on the financial information of the Tata Sons. Okay. Also, the Tata Sons financial information includes one or more components financial statement. This is audited by the another auditor. Audited by the another auditor. Okay. Then there is a two components. That is, what do you mean by other auditor and also components? First one is other auditor. In case of other auditor and other auditor means it is very simple. The definition is very simple. Other than the principal auditor is known as other auditor. Okay. The responsibility for reporting the financial information of the component. Who has the responsibility to report on the component's financial statement is known as the other auditor. Okay. What do you mean by component? Component refers to it is a division, branch, subsidiary, joint venture, associate, or other entity whose financial information, that is financial statements, included in the entity's financial consolidated financial information, which is audited by the principal auditor. The consolidated financial information audited by the principal auditor. It is known as component. Okay. The audit is conducted by the other auditor for the component. The audited information included in the consolidated financial statement. The consolidated financial statement audited by the principal auditor. Okay. Now, introduction. SA 600 provides the guidelines. It provides the guidelines for the group auditor when they're using the work of another auditor in audit of financial information of an entity. It has already we have discussed. That is financial information of the entity, that is holding company. In our example, it is a Tata Sons financial statement audited by the principal auditor. Okay. Overall responsibility and reliance. When an auditor, that is principal auditor, delegates the works to other auditors, they remain responsible for forming and expressing an opinion on their financial information. However, the principal auditor is entitled to rely on the work performed by others, provided they exercise the adequate skill and not aware of the reason to believe that such reliance is inappropriate. If auditor is believe that the reliance is inappropriate, then is not entitled to rely on the work of others. Okay. In case of independent auditors, independent statutory appointment. In case of statutory audit, that is branch auditors under Companies Act. Okay, under Companies Act, where the principal auditor relies on the work of forming an opinion, the auditor's report shall expressly state that the factors reliance on the work should be included in the principal auditor's report. That will be as per SA 706, other meta paragraph. Okay. In case of reliance, he has to refer the fact in the principal auditor's report. Okay. Scope exclusions. Okay. SA 600 is not our joint auditor's work. In case of joint audit, as per SA 299, 299 is applicable in case of joint auditors. Case of previous auditor. In case of previous auditor is also not covered in this standard. Okay, we have already discussed the key definition. What is the purpose of SA 600? Purpose of 600 is to establish the standard to provide the principal auditor uses the work of another auditor. Okay, what is the purpose? Purpose means what is the purpose of providing this standard? The purpose of providing standard, it is a guidelines for the principal auditor and using the work of other auditors. Okay. Information containing one or more component included in the entity's financial information, that is consolidated financial statement CFS. Okay. Also, SA 600 discuss the principal auditor's responsibility. What is the responsibility of the principal auditor in relation to use of the work of other auditor? In relation to use of work of other auditor. This standard financial information. Okay, I have mentioned the financial information in everywhere. Okay, the financial information means the financial statements. Okay, don't confuse with the financial information. Financial information includes financial statement. Financial statement includes statements of profit and loss account, balance sheet, and also a statement of income, and also changes in equity and notes to accounts. Okay. What are the factors to be considered by the principal auditor while accepting the engagement? In case of while accepting the engagement, the following factors to be considered by the principal auditor. Okay. Before accepting the work of principal auditor, as the principal auditor, the auditor should consider, that is, principal auditor should consider the four following cases. Materiality portion for the financial information that the principal auditor directly audits, that is, entity's financial statement. That is only a standalone financial statements. Materiality portion. Auditor has to consider. Okay. Next, auditor will consider, the principal auditor, degree of knowledge regarding businesses of the components. He has to consider the component business. That is degree of knowledge of this, my knowledge. Okay. I have to consider my whether I have a knowledge of degree of knowledge regarding the business of components. In our example, okay, the Tata Sons has a component, the components business for IT sector, steel, automotive, also consumer and retail, infrastructure, financial services, and also tourism, travel, and trading and investment. There are business. I need to have a degree of knowledge regarding the components businesses. Okay. While accepting as a principal auditor, I need to have a degree of knowledge regarding this business. Next, the third one is risk of material misstatement in the financial information of component audited by other auditor. Okay. As per SA 315, what is the risk of material misstatement in the audit of components? Components audited by the other auditors. Okay. What is the risk of material misstatement? This while planning and performing the audit itself will determine the what is the risk of material misstatement. While determining the risk of material misstatement, the planning stage itself, auditor has to consider the ROMM, that is risk of material misstatement. Okay. The potential for performing the additional procedure set out. Also, auditor has to consider the SA 600 in this point. Okay. Next is the principal auditor's procedures when using the work of another auditor. While using the work of another auditor, what are the auditor's procedures to be used? Okay. The audit procedures are: the principal auditor should perform the procedures to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence. Where in case of audit, we will obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence whether the financial statements are free from material misstatement. So in this case also, in case of consolidated financial statement, principal auditor has to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence that the work of other auditors is adequate. If it is adequate for the principal auditor's purpose. What is the purpose? The purpose is to audit the consolidated financial statement. Okay. While auditing the consolidated financial statement, he has to obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence whether the work of other auditor is sufficient. Okay. Key procedures. What are the procedures to be performed by principal auditor? Okay. He has a right to visit the component, also examine the books of accounts. Okay, he has a right to visit the component and also examine the books of accounts. In some situation, the statute may confer the right on the principal auditor to visit and the component and also examines books of accounts. It can be conferred a right on the principal auditor to visit the component and also examine its books of accounts and records. Okay. Considering the professional competence of the other auditor. Okay. When the principal auditor should consider the competence, professional competence. In case the principal component auditor is a member of the ICA, that is Chartered Accountant in Practice as per the Institute of Chartered Accountant of India, then principal auditor not required to check the professional competence. Okay. Component auditor. பாத்தீங்கன்னா காம்பனன்ட் ஆடிட்டர் வந்து qualified from the Institute of Chartered Accountant of India. So he has a competence actually. So the principal auditor need not to check the competence of the other auditor. Generally, while planning the use of work of another auditor, principal auditor should assess the professional competence of other auditor in the context of specific engagement, especially if the other auditor is not a member of the institute, then he has to check the professional competence. Next, general procedures. General procedures is performed to ensure that the adequacy of work of another auditor. Okay, he has to follow the standard, that is SA 600. It is a general procedure. Advice and coordination. Okay, advice and coordination. The principal auditor will advise the other auditor regarding use of their work and the report. Okay, advising the other auditors regarding use of their work and the report. Make sufficient arrangement for coordination at the planning stage of audit. The principal auditor should inform the other auditor while planning stage, in the planning stage, while planning the audit. Okay, in the start of the audit, after accepting the engagement, auditor will plan the engagement to conduct the audit. While planning the engagement, auditor has to inform the auditor about areas requiring special consideration. Okay, in case of assets, liabilities, inventories, if the inventory is more significant in the audit of financial statement, auditor will inform the other auditor, principal auditor will inform the principal other component auditor to consider special consideration should be areas requiring special consideration. Okay. Also, procedure for identifying intercompany transaction. Intercompany transaction, that is intercomponent transaction. Intercompany transaction that may require disclosure. As per Ind AS and AS, we need to report, the company need to report the intercompany transactions. Also, the timetable for completion of audit. What are the information auditor has to inform? First one is areas requiring special consideration, and also procedures for identifying the what are the procedures required. Identify the intercompany transaction or intercomponent transaction. Also, the timetable for completion of audit. When the timetable is shared, when the timetable for audit is shared between the auditor, then the audit will be completed within the due date itself. Okay. Significant requirement and compliance. Okay. Principal auditor can advise about significant accounting, auditing, financial reporting requirements and obtain a written representation. Okay, he will advise the other auditor about significant accounting, auditing, and reporting requirement, and also he will obtain a written representation that the other auditor has complied with that significant requirements. Okay, he will inform about advice. He will advise about accounting, auditing, and reporting requirement. Then he will obtain a written representation from the other auditor on compliance of the same. Okay, reviewing the work of other auditor. Principal auditor has to review the work of other auditor. The principal auditor might discuss the procedures applied by the other auditor or a review written. That is, he will send a questionnaire to the other auditor or a checklist. Questionnaire or a checklist sent by the principal auditor to the other auditor about complaints or a procedures performed by the other auditor. Okay. That is the written summary of the procedures and findings. The other auditor will share the summary of procedures and findings on the audit of component. Principal auditor will use the summary and questionnaire. Okay. Principal auditor may also visit the other auditor. Okay. Principal auditor has a right to visit the component, and also he can visit the other auditor and discuss with other auditor. Okay. Nature, timing, extent of the procedures depend on the circumstances of the engagement, materiality, and the principal auditor's knowledge of the other auditor's professional competence. Okay. This is also we have circumstances of the engagement. That is what is the engagement is. Also materiality and the principal auditor's knowledge of the other auditor's professional competence. Okay. Considering the significant findings. One is considering significant findings. The principal auditor should consider significant findings of the other auditor. If the significant findings will be disclosed in the other auditor's report, okay, he has to consider the significant findings. Okay, during the audit also the significant findings can be identified by the other auditor. It will be shared or discussed with the communicated with the principal auditor. Okay, we may discuss the findings or other matters affecting the financial information of the component to the other auditor and the component management. The information can be communicated with the other auditor and also components management. Okay. Supplementary procedures. The principal auditor may decide to apply supplementary procedures to test the records or financial statements of the component if deemed necessary. If it is necessary for the principal auditor to perform supplementary procedures, he can perform supplementary procedures. Okay. When the other auditor is not professionally qualified. In our example, the telecom and media component is audited by CPA. Assume the CPA is not a okay. Assume the CPA is not a qualified professional. Okay, in UK, it's allowed by the laws of that country. UK allows if it is the assumption. I am giving the example. Don't take it as a real one. Assume that CPA is not a qualified professional or in UK, then the financial information included in the consolidated financial information. Okay. In this case also, the other auditor is not professionally qualified in certain circumstances. That is foreign component where local law permit. If the local law UK is permit the unqualified professional as an auditor, then principal auditor uses the work of that auditor, then he has to ensure the work is appropriate for their reliance. There is a question of reliance on the report provided by the other auditor. So then documentation. In case of audit, in every stage, we have to document it. So the last point is documentation. The principal auditor should document the following. What we have to document? Components whose financial information was audited by other auditor. The financial information, that is financial statement of components, should be documented. Also, the procedures performed and conclusion reached regarding use of work of other auditor. What are the procedures? The procedures performed by the principal auditor is these procedures are performed by principal auditor. These procedures should be documented. Also, consider how the auditor has reached the conclusion using the work of other auditor. Also, the result of discussions with the other auditor and the review of their written summary. That is written. What do you mean the written summary? That is questionnaire and checklist provided by the principal auditor to other auditor, which will be filled by them and send it to the principal auditor. That also be documented by the principal auditor. And also, if the other auditor's report is modified, how the principal auditors dealt with the qualification or adverse remark in framing the own report. While preparing the auditor's report on the consolidated financial statement, how the qualification and adverse remark provided by the other auditor in standalone financial information of the component should be documented. How he has dealt with that qualifications. Okay. Next, note can be asked as a 3 mark or 4 mark question. Okay, this one part past examination, this question was asked. Okay, but it is not included anywhere in the book statement. The principal auditor has no right for asking to start the working paper. Principal auditor can ask the summary and findings. Okay, summary and findings in a questionnaire or a checklist. Okay, or a report and consolidated financial information. But he has no right to asking the working papers. Okay, principal auditor has no right to working papers of the other auditor. It is the discretion of the other auditor to provide the working papers to the principal auditor. Okay. In the examination, ABC associate is the principal auditor, and the PQR limited, PQR and associates is the component auditor. ABC limited, ABC and associate requested the working papers of the PQR limit, PQR and associate. PQR and associate refused to provide the working papers. அப்படின்னு சொல்லிட்டு what is the answer as per essay 11th essay in question கேட்டிருந்தாங்கன்னா what we have to do? The principal auditor has no right in asking the working papers. You have to write this first. He has a right to visit and examine the books of accounts, and also he has a can review the work of other auditor by sending the questionnaire and a summary of their procedures and findings. He can request the summary of findings and procedures, and also he can advise the other auditor to apply the requirements as per accounting and auditing and financial reporting requirements. Okay, he can consider and advise and coordinate with the other auditor, but he has no right in asking the working papers of other auditor. It is the discretion of the other auditor. If other auditor wants to provide the other working papers, he can provide. But for example, PQR Limited can provide the working paper, but the decision has to be taken by the other auditor. Okay, the principal auditor is, that is ABC and associate, is not not have a right to ask the working papers for the auditor, because the working papers is the property of the other auditor. The working papers are the property of other auditor. Coordination between Coordination between auditors. Coordination between principal auditor and other auditor. Next point. Let's start. Coordination between principal auditor and other auditor. There must be a sufficient liaison between the principal auditor and other auditor. Meanwhile, a written communication from principal auditor. It should be communicated by written, okay, into the other auditor. The other auditor's consideration, okay. Other auditor consider the written communication by principal auditor. What he has to consider, other auditor being aware of the context in which your work is used should coordinate with the principal auditor. If the work is used by the principal auditor, the other auditor has to coordinate with the principal auditor. Bring any significant findings. If the other auditors aware of any significant findings, he has to immediately inform to the principal auditor. Okay, bring any significant findings requiring attention at the entity level to the principal auditor, immediate attention. Okay, next is adherent to the timetable of the components audit. If uh, any component auditor is not following the timetable, then reporting on the holding company's financial information, that is due date, be affected. Okay, ensuring compliance with the relevant statutory requirement. Okay, ensuring other auditor has to ensure that they has to comply with the statutory requirements. Also, principal auditor advice. We have discussed now audit procedures. What are the advice provided by the principal auditor to the other auditor? It has to be followed by the other auditor. The principal auditor should advise the other auditor of any matter that comes to the attention that may significantly affect the work of other auditor. If principal auditor feels that the any significant matter that will affect the work of other auditor, he has to inform the other auditor about the significant matter and provide advice. Next is questionnaires. We have already discussed. Principal auditor will send the questionnaires to the other auditor. Other auditor will provide the sufficient information in the questionnaires and send it back to the principal auditor. Principal auditor has to use the questionnaires to rely on the work of other auditor. He will not have, he has no right to ask the working papers of other auditor. So reporting requirement. Qualified or a disclaimer of opinion. Case of qualified or a disclaimer of opinion, that is scope limitation. Okay. What do you mean by scope limitation? The work of other auditor cannot be used by the principal auditor, then there is a scope limitation will arise. In case of scope limitation, with the scope limitation, will not be able to provide obtain sufficient appropriate audit evidence. So, if the principal auditor concludes that the work of another auditor cannot be used, and the principal auditor has not able to perform additional procedures regarding components financial information, if work is not cannot be used and also not able to perform sufficient additional procedures also for the components financial information, the principal auditor should express the qualified opinion or a disclaimer of opinion due to scope limitation. In case of scope limitation, audit will not be conducted in proper manner. Okay, if the auditors issues the modified report, if other auditor issues the modified report, principal auditor has to consider the modification. Okay, why the modification is provided by the component auditor has to be considered by the principal auditor at the materiality level fixed by the principal auditor. Okay, next, division of responsibility. Principal auditor is not generally not responsible. Okay, principal auditor not responsible for work entrusted to other auditor. He is responsible for his work, own work. Okay, I will be responsible for consolidated financial statement, but he is not responsible for work of other auditor for standalone financial statement. He is responsible for consolidated financial statement, but he is not responsible for standalone financial statement of other auditors. That is components financial information. Okay, except the circumstances that have aroused suspicion. If principal auditor has a suspicion about the reliability of work of other auditor, then in that case he has to take responsibility. Okay, he has the responsibility in case he has already has a suspicion about the reliability of work of other auditor. In this case, principal auditor is responsible. Okay, and principal auditor bases their opinion on the entity's financial information by relying on the statements and report of other auditor, clearly state the division of responsibility in other matter paragraph. As per SI 706, use emphasis of matter paragraph and other matter paragraph. As per 706, principal auditor has to refer the work of other auditor and the division of responsibility. Okay, the report. This is done by indicating extent of which financial information component audited by other auditor has been included in the entity's financial information. This is asked in the September 2025 examination. That is covered in group audits. Okay, in detailed discussion is on group audit. It should be the other matter paragraph. It should be included. Okay. If the principal auditor notices any material discrepancies, this must be brought to the knowledge of the other auditor and incorporated in the auditor's report. So already discussed. Any significant findings should be brought to the notice of the auditor also, the principal auditor. And so, thank you.